Check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. That's right. Batteries are backwards on this one. Check 1 2. Purple. Check 1 2. Mic 3. Check 1 2 3. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. 1 2. Fourth chair. I have 4 on my hand right now. I have number 4. Check 1 2. Mic 2. Check. Check 1 2. Mic 5. Check 1 2. 5. Check 1 2. Okay. Oh, 279, I think. 279.
Check. 1 2 1 2 2 2. Why does it sound okay for me and not for you? 1 2 1 2. It's, I believe it's when I'm up here. Check 1 2 1 2. One, two. Check 3. One, two, 2 2 3 4. Check 1 2. Perfect. 1 2 3 4. Check 1 2 1 2 3 4. 1 2 1 2. Check 1. Microphone. Do you still hear it? 1 2 3 4. Two. Wow. Hot. Hot.
So the way we're going to go is I'm going to show one slide, the welcome back slide. Then I'm going to show Nick's title slide. Hand him he'll come on. I'll hand him the clicker. Switch to his deck. Right. After he's done, switch back so we show my title slide. Then switch to my deck. So I'll say, so let's get started. And then we can switch to my deck. The only thing is that video. So if you want to just pace through until you see the kid climbing in this slide, and then if you can either have it auto kick off, that's great. Load it, I'll call for it. I'll call for it. We're fine. Hey, yeah, no, hey, how you doing? Good. Welcome. Yeah, same here. How you doing? Good. Yeah, yeah, I'm good. Yeah, yeah. Thank. I have to tell you, thank you for the weather gods for because it's kept people in the room. So it's been great. Yeah, yeah, wonderful. So yeah, good. I think we're having a little trouble getting people back into the room. So yeah, yeah.
Okay, we'll look forward to it.
So, John, oh, yeah, okay, good. Yeah, our producer. Yeah. So.
Eric, do you mind just playing some music for a little bit? It's going to
Yeah,
help
go
get
ahead.
people
Okay.
in.
So,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Go on.
please.
You might do it twice.
You guys can
Yeah.
thank you
So,
for
no, I
joining
really
us.
appreciate your coming.
Yeah.
And
we're on tomorrow morning, probably around 9:30.
come on, please, come on. That's not canned music, folks. That's not canned music, folks. That's Eric Barnett. Eric can just make that axe talk. All right. So welcome back. I hope that you had some mind-blowing sessions. I'm going to just get started. I know people are still straggling in, but we want to keep the train moving. So as I said earlier, the arc of our event was this morning, what's happening. Now it's what's coming. And I wear a number of hats, which I'll talk about in just a minute, but one of them is that I'm the chair for the future work with Singularity University, which is sort of a learning platform, a company based in Silicon Valley. It's neither about the Singularity nor is it a university, so we have some identity problems that we're working on. It's not about the Singularity because I personally don't believe there's this mythical time where one computer is suddenly going to be smarter than a human. I mean, I think in aggregate, if you sort of add our computing power together, we sort of already passed that point a long time ago. But it's not a university because actually it's mostly adjunct faculty. There's 300 brainiacs from all around the world, knowledgeable about what we call exponential technologies, and Nick's going to talk about those in just a sec. But in the United States, to be an accredited university, you have to freeze your curriculum. You got to pour glue on it for 2 years. And in Singularity, we change our curriculum every 2 weeks, constantly updating from practitioners about the most mind-blowing technologies that are transforming our industries, our organizations, and our lives. And so what I wanted to do was to help to give you a little bit of some of the taste of that mind-blowing set of technologies and influences that we see. We often call disruptive technologies, but we can talk about what that really means. And then I'll talk about the implications for the future of work and some of the sort of history of how we've thought about that in the past, and then we can talk about how work is transforming and how might me, there's too much lunch. How might we collaborate together to create that positive future? So please, let's see if we got, like I said, AI is easy, but AV is hard. There we go. Okay, so please welcome Nick Davis.
AV is fun. Sound check. Hear me in the back? All right, I like it. How was lunch? Session's good? Everyone got caffeine? You're going to need it. I'm going to go real fast. I've got 25 minutes. We've got 51 slides. My average is 1 slide every 27 seconds. It's going to feel like a shotgun, right? We're going to go pretty quick, but hopefully that'll be the right pace, and we'll leave you a little bit happy and terrified at the same time. And I'm down. Speak of the devil. Anyone got a joke? Beautiful mountains. Gary, this doesn't count against my time. We'll go to reset. Yeah. Yeah. I swear we just tested this. And so I'll give you a little bit of history. We'll start with this one. So for things we don't need for slides. So as Gary said, Singularity University's been around for about 10 years. We were co-founded by Ray Kurzweil and Peter Diamandis. Ray is currently the head of AI, or one of the directors at Google. So a lot of work around what we're calling exponential technologies. I'll talk a little bit about the exponential curve and some of the implications of the technologies as we think about it. Peter is kind of a serial entrepreneur. His training is he's an MD from Harvard, but actually is not a practicing physician. Co-founded and founders of things like the X Prize, Human Longevity, Planetary Resources, many things that are pretty futuristic, if you will. They came together and created this university to think about the technologies that are impacting us all in about every facet of our lives today, and then ultimately how organizations, how individuals navigate those times to have a positive impact on the world. All right, and we're up. Awesome. Thanks, pal. Okay. A lion. We've all heard this idea that ultimately we're really good fight or flight, right? If we sense danger, we can move away from it very quickly. So in our longer workshops, many times I'll get people up in the front and kind of pretend to be a lion, chase each other around a little bit. And we have this idea of if we sense danger, we can move very, very quickly. Where we fall short as a species is where we know something might be dangerous, but we're not sure how far away it is, right? We're not very good at reacting. And what I'll challenge you to think about today is that a lot of these technologies, we know they're coming. Autonomous vehicles, drones, AI, synthetic biology, quantum computing. I'll show you some examples, but we really don't know how fast, when. So we don't really know how we should engage, both positive and negative, right? They're conceptual in nature, thus it's coming faster than I would argue we're ready for, right? So the things we'll talk about today is how we get ready for these fast approaching technologies, okay? Awesome. So for the first 250,000 years or so of our species, we're local and linear, right? We're nomadic. We're moving around, we're farming, we're growing communities. And very quickly in the last 100 years, 75 years, 50 years, we've moved into this exponential global phase, right? Things are getting faster and faster, right? Today is the slowest day that you will ever experience on this planet again, right? When you think about that, right? So we have all this stuff happening, right? We're 3D printing food, we're manipulating genomics of embryos. We've got all these things around drones and AI and AR, VR. You walk through your local mall and you've got crazy VR roller coasters now, right? It's everywhere in all parts of our life in some pretty unique ways, right? So one thing that you'll see up there is a 3D printer. We partnered with NASA and Lowe's and 3D printed the first tool on the International Space Station, right? So the very first production off this planet is that 3D printer in the lower right corner that we worked on. Things that really push the realm of these technologies. And I'll show you some pretty scary new ones. Given where we are, I thought this was a pretty good quote. We'll see more change in the next 5 years than there's been in the last 50. Who feels that the pace of change is starting to become pretty overwhelming? Hands? Right? We don't even know where to look to keep up, right? It's coming at us from all directions. So, exponential, based on Moore's law, Gordon Moore, Intel, basically processing power is doubling over and over and over again. We get an exponential curve. But I'll show you what that actually feels like versus the conceptual mathematical side of that. If I take 30 linear steps, so I'll end up with my jacket in the back, right? I'm pretty tall, I can get there. What about if I take 30 exponential steps? How far do I go? Guesses? Around the next galaxy, right? 26 times around this Earth. And most of that change is the last few steps, right? The beginning is boring, right? That's why it's so difficult for us to really conceptualize how fast this is going to impact us, because we can't imagine how quick that ending is going to be. But I'll show you some examples of where we're actually starting to feel this, right? So we'll see this world through this exponential lens. So here, I know it's a little bit hard to see, but if you can't see these monitors, if you look up here to the larger one, this is basically a list of the technologies that are being developed right now in real time. And most of the time when you'll hear experts talk about them, they'll talk about the impact of AI, the impact of autonomy, right? But you rarely hear us talking about what happens when they start to bump into each other. What happens when they come too quickly? So the joke I'll make a lot, like, who's ever remodeled their house? Right? It's always twice as expensive, twice as long, right? And God knows where your contractor's at any given moment. These technologies, they're always twice as fast and twice as cheap than we expect, right? So what happens for us as a society? Disappearing middle class, right? I'm an executive at a food bank, thinking about how difficult it's going to be to feed the individuals in our countries and our cities when all of a sudden, more and more of our middle class disappear because of the changing jobs, right? Automation, things that we see. How do we think about upskilling those individuals? So a lot of these things from these technologies don't impact us in a negative way, but a positive way. Okay? So, fun example here. We all know this and we've all got them in front of us. iPhone, right? To this example of this disappointment curve, anybody remember the Razor phone? Everyone loves the Razor phone. It was like the best phone ever. I remember having that and I'm like, this is the pinnacle of my technological life. That thing was awesome. And then this happened. January 9th, 2007, boom. And that Razor phone was like, joke, right? It was a fundamental change in where we are going, and we've been accelerating ever since. So think about that curve, and all of a sudden, boom, escalation. And what I'll argue right now, we're there with AI and genomic editing. I'll show you some things that we're doing for genomes right now. It's scary where we're getting ready to head into. It is this fundamental change. But for speed, what happened 232 days later? Anybody? This happened. Nokia launched their smartphone. Their CEO came out and said, we didn't do anything wrong. Somehow we lost. Speed. The speed by which we can competitively compete these days is ever increasing from months to weeks to days to hours. The insights you can gather, the technologies that you adopt, how quickly you make decisions, take actions against them, is speeding up, which is causing us chaos, right? And we feel that. Retail. Anybody remember those brands at the top? I used to go school shopping at like JCPenney and Macy's. Remember when walking through a Kmart was cool? They're all gone. Toys R Us gone. Blockbuster gone. All of these huge brands, complete change, right? And we're seeing this in every major industry because of the technologies. They're not adapting them fast enough, right? Okay. I saw this in the AI talk before this, or part of it. World Economic Forum 2025 list of things that are most likely to happen leveraging these technologies. Noticed AI pharmacists, AI teachers. We have an AI on our faculty staff. Of the 300 of us, one of us is an AI, soon to take my job, right? Faster and faster and faster. The implications for this for the future of work are obviously pretty crazy. So, good quote, the future of work consists of learning and living. We're gonna be constantly learning about these technologies and updating our skills. So let me show you a few of them. This one, Amazon, was tested in Seattle last year, just went to Southern California in the last few months. They're literally out on the streets now delivering packages to your home. So think about, walk outside, if you're like my house, instead of the cardboard boxes everywhere, you know, this little robot will come out and grab it. UPS, already doing drone delivery. So this is Matternet, this is one of the startups that we're invested in. We've been doing drug delivery in Africa for a while, right? One of our big tractor companies, we do delivery of like mobile parts where we can't get to them because of road conditions or whatever. Soon, this is gonna be delivered right to your house, right? You live in a rural area, boom, delivered. You hit it for me? This is one of the most popular new kind of individual automated flying cars, set to release in 3 years. They're testing it now. This is a working model. Soon you'll be able to go to major metropolitan areas, fly around, get in. Uber's goal is to make this cheaper than taking one of their UberX rides. We'll see if that actually happens. But a lot of money and investment are going into this. How we think about urban planning in the future is going to change. When it's cheaper and more convenient for us as a species, we adopt it, right? How about this one? This was a week ago, 2 weeks ago. You hit play for me? At a mall, somebody recorded this. This is the new feature for Tesla that allows you to call your car to you if it's 200 feet away. It was on the wrong side of the road, just driving itself through a parking lot. People are like, do I walk in front of it? Like this woman's like pausing in the crosswalk, like, right? This is starting to happen, right? The ghosts in the machines. Now, will we adopt it, right? This is a grocery delivery one, right? All the robots are starting to take over from an automation standpoint. Will we trust it? I think we will, right? Trucks was brought up last session. For me, and it's probably the wrong state to say this in, but I live in Ohio. Number one job in Ohio, truck drivers. Number one thing that we're focusing on automating, trucks. How quickly we're looking to do that? This is a McKinsey study. By 2027, they predict that all the trucks will drive themselves. That's in 7 years. In this country right now, there are 68,000 open jobs for truck drivers. Would you tell a friend to go learn that skill? Knowing they'd be out of work soon, right? It's fundamentally changing where we're going. If you're worried about automation, we've been doing it in planes for a long time. These are two pilots sleeping while they're flying, right? Hopefully that's not happening on the flights I'm on at least. But, you know, ultimately, this automation, the robot driving, flying for a while has been happening, right? Tesla driver on the street, sleeping while I was going on the freeway in San Francisco. This was a funny and terrifying video, like literally just on the freeway. Arms crossed, knocked out. Right? We are in this world. Okay. So from an AI standpoint, right now we're about mouse brain level. Well, predicting middle to end of 2026, 27, human brain potential. And as Gary said, it won't happen in one time, but it will happen quickly, right? And then we'll have an exponential growth from that standpoint, giving us some pretty amazing capabilities. Deep fake. Anyone hear about this in the news? So even the world's leading experts are now predicting that instead of 2 to 3 years away, we're about 6 months from you seeing a person on television, it being an AI, not a real human, and can literally mimic that person, their voice, their persona, without us being able to recognize it's not them. So imagine you look at a video on Facebook, media, in trouble, right? We won't know if it's the real person. Here's one for you. Anyone ever spit their gum out on a subway? Don't lie. You know you've done it, one of you. Someone's done it. This artist picked up gum off the subway in New York, ran their DNA, 3D printed their face, and hung them in a gallery without asking them. Yep, that's possible. Biohacking DNA, a kit mailed to your house, $200, and now you've got people actually starting to recode themselves and inject it at home. He did this to make his muscles bigger, which is heritable, could pass this on, right? Changing the fundamental DNA of ourselves in our garage. We are now able to engineer just about any capability into an infant, right? Should we? No. Could we? Yeah. Imagine the future of work when you've been bioengineered to be 50 points higher IQ than your competitor, which is possible soon, right? And which country will do it first, right? Quantum computing will allow us to actually think about every financial transaction in the world at the same moment and analyze them all. So I used to work at Price Waterhouse, big accounting and auditing firm. Imagine if we don't need to send auditors all over the country to audit our clients when one computer can do it all instantaneously. What does that do for all the professional services firms and consultants out there? All those jobs, hundreds of thousands, millions. Accounting, gone, right? Okay. I made it bleak, told some scary and fun stuff. There's good news. We're gonna have to lean in, and if we do, we can make this all spin for the positive. The technology has the capability for us to truly solve, like, humanity's global grand challenges, as we say at Singularity. This is all good stuff, but we have to pay some attention, right? So we often will think about how quickly we need to start to actually react to this. So here's some fun stats for you. What's up gained more followers in the first 6 years than Christianity did in the first 19 centuries. Anybody's kids play Fortnite? Ugh. Right? How quickly did that become a global phenomenon and how quickly gone again? Right? My 11-year-old's like, Minecraft, duh, why would we play Fortnite, Dad? I mean, please. That's not cool anymore. Huge and then gone again. Right? How fast we're able to move things around is pretty amazing. Sorry, wrong way. So we all say we want this future, right? Utopia, beautiful, organic, local grown, everything is clean. What I worry about is this is actually how we're making decisions. So as an entrepreneur and as an investor, I will often tell people if it makes someone more lazy, it's investable. Uber Eats, Uber Rides, convenience. I don't want to be troubled. My time is the most important thing to me. I don't want to get out of bed. Deliver it to me. A lot of the things that are going on in our lives now are decisions that we're making out of convenience, not out of necessity. So what I worry about is us really leaning in and ensuring that we're holding each other accountable to build the first slide, right? Because ultimately, if we're not careful, we're going to end up with we're just floating in a chair, drinking our Coke, shopping online, delivered by drone to myself, and I didn't have to move, right? Which if you look around the world, and the decisions that we're making is scary, but a reality if we're not careful. Okay, so one model here, anyone ever heard of John Boyd, fighter pilot? I taught for the military last week, and every hand went up, and I was like, oh, got the right credit. So this is a model that was taught in the 80s about basically doing kind of a fighter pilot model. He argued that by following these 4 steps, you could maintain competitive advantage. I'm going to use this for the future. Orientating, understanding the future around you for your role, your community, your position, whatever you're focused on. Orientating yourself to that. Making a decision around what you're going to do proactively to be able to lean into it and taking action. If we're all following these steps, we do have the ability to make this a positive impact, right? We're upskilling and reskilling people for the jobs of tomorrow. That's why we're all sitting here and leaning in. But if we're not doing this, if we just learn about it and then we go home and we don't change our behavior, we're in trouble, right? Okay. So to be different, we have to think different. We're going to engage in this better community. Do we believe that? Y'all promise me right here? Okay. So here's the concept. I'm going to give you the concept and I'll take a question if you have time for it. So to be a future maker is not enough to ride the wave. You have to also be the wave. Create the disruptive force and then ride it until it's time to disrupt again. We call this surfing the S-curves of leadership. Conceptualize that. Think about it. Like, you're actually creating the thing that you want to see, and then you're helping it come true. There's a power in that, right? The visualization around that from a leadership perspective, it's saying true to me, at least when we came up with the concept. Does that feel right? And most oftentimes we see disruption as a thing that's happening to us, not something that we're proactively creating, disrupting in a good way, right? We're going to rethink the university model. We're going to rethink our hiring model. We're going to rethink how we manage talent, both human and robot. And we're going to ride that wave together. Right? Okay. So I'm going to give you 10 just basic mindsets, frameworks here. I'm happy to share these slides, and I'll give you my email here at the end if you want them. We've got a book and some workshops and stuff that we do around this, but I wanted to give you at least the basics of it to kind of push our thinking a little bit. So I've shown you what exponential thinking is. So basically going from incremental, and we all know this, we've always done it that way. Legal will tell me no, right? To exponential. We have to think about the speed of which these are happening differently, thus change the way that we attack these problems. So tech-focused, so tinkering with toys. I mean, we have a lab, we've got drones in it and fun stuff that we tinker with, but really putting the person at the center. How are we solving person-centric design, right? Design thinking at its core, and not just tinkering to say we're tinkering. Right? Like I have a lot of people who have VR goggles. Just because you have it doesn't mean you're exponential. Right? What are you doing with it, ultimately? So the activity, we hear this from a lot of executives, right? I'm measuring output, right? Our inputs, right? So how many ideas did you come up with? 7,000 ideas. Well, how many of them got done? Well, I mean, but we generated a lot of activity, right? We have to get them across to actually output, revenue, impact, help a person. In my world, we fed a lot of people, right? We feed at my food bank 150,000 people a day. If I'm not taking it to 200, I can have 1,000 good ideas, but if they're not done, it doesn't matter, right? So theoretical, very conceptual out there. We can talk about them, it's great, but ultimately we need to get to the experimental. How fast are we running prototypes and learning? That experimentation, you hear a lot about like entrepreneurship. What people are really saying is act like an entrepreneur, build quickly, learn fast, move stuff forward, try and tinker, and learn from your mistakes. And we as leaders need to let our people have the freedom to do that. There's nothing worse than being like, go try something new. Oh, it didn't work. Shame on you, right? So idea negative, bad till proven good. Idea positive, good till proven bad. Naysayers have a role to play. But it's later in the process when we've gotten the idea to a certain amount of validity, and then we need someone to push back and say, can we really do this? But don't do it too soon, right? Okay. Perfect. So prediction to exploration. So Astro Teller, who's the head of Google X, would tell you that if you already know the outcome of an experiment before you begin, it is not a good experiment. And I see companies do this all the time, right? Like, we should go test that. I'm like, do you already know what's going to happen? Because you're just trying to protect your job, right? Don't do that, right? A good experiment is learning. You should be pushing yourself to an uncomfortable level and really getting out in front of it, allowing yourself that curiosity. right? Conversation, so all no, to the ideation, aha. That's kind of a fun one, right? So coming at it from that positive perspective. Fiscal impatience, money now. For innovation leaders all the time, I hear this from CFOs. That's great, you guys did a lot of cool stuff. You built some new product. How much did it make last quarter? Right? That's important, but at the right timing, right? We don't want to get so far so quickly into the how much did it make us until we give things a chance to actually grow, nurture, and scale. So alleviating some of that. One of my favorites, to the innovation garden, to the innovation jungle. This work is scary. It's ugly at times. There's a tiger behind you, right? It's a jungle. And so ultimately we have the opportunity to allow ourselves to say, this is going to be uncomfortable. I remind this to my legal team all the time, right? This is not supposed to be perfect. We're not going to be able to alleviate all risk. Ultimately, we're going to have a little bit of messiness in here, right? And how do we give ourselves some comfort around that? And finally, siloed thinking, so atomized to the systems thinking. We can no longer make decisions for just our departments, just our focus, just our area. Everything, because of these technologies, is interconnected systems-wise, and we have to be able to plan for that, right? So how does it affect the whole system? Us as a species, us as a company, us as a department, whatever it may be, all together. Make sense? Okay. So, website, email, coming out in March. If you like some of these just general concepts, hit me up. We're happy to talk about it more deeply. And again, I'm happy to share these slides with anybody who'd like them. Okay? And I've got 1 minute to answer questions. So I'll take one or two. We'll see how we go. Please. Right. Yeah, so the Ds that he's referring to, Peter Diamandis came out with a book, it's called the 6 Ds. So demonetization, dematerialization, basically anything that can be digitized, goes cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and can be democratized across the world. That's a basic concept, and we've got some stuff there on the website if you want to see it. Yeah, I mean, for me, the genome editing is a really interesting one, right? Like the fastest and cheapest growing technology from an exponential standpoint that we've ever experienced as a species is genome mapping, right? So you think about early 2000s, $3 billion to do it the first time. You can go to Target right now, buy a 23andMe kit for $99. $3 billion to $99. And now we're moving very quickly into like CRISPR, where we can actually pull out chunks of DNA at home in our garage. What he's doing is literally in his garage. He was a NASA researcher, and he's going out and pulling these chunks out and then delivering customized DNA to anyone who just wants it so they can just self-inject. I mean, think about that from a physician standpoint. You're manipulating your own DNA and experimenting on yourself at home. And the exponential growth isn't going to stop. So in my personal opinion, we're going to have country states who will start to say, I can make someone faster, taller, smarter, certain conditions can be weathered better, and that will be a better soldier. And then all of a sudden you'll see an arms race on genetics. I think that will happen. So without regulation, we're going to get ourselves in a lot of trouble real quick, ethically, and I think, as a species, quite frankly. It's a really scary one. So I think, for me, there has to be some regulation, or otherwise we're going to get ourselves in trouble. I mean, we haven't shown many years that we're responsible in some cases with these things. So it should be there. But I don't think that it's going to be able to stop how fast it will happen. Someone will take it and start to leverage it, hopefully in a good way. Okay. One more? That was it? Yes, yes, and yes. Will there be a divide? I hope that we as a species lean into this so much that we have the capability to see that that's where we're heading, and we will push into an area where we democratize this. Now, what do we normally do, right? People with wealth and means will start with, I can have a child that I now know I can program out susceptibility to cancer, HIV, certain disease states. That can happen now. But what happens when that starts to happen with only people who can pay for it? Which will happen if we are not careful. That's happening now, right? And then all of a sudden you start to get such a divide. How long until it says, well, you know, I want my kid to go to Harvard, so can I just pay the extra bonus fee and increase their IQ by 20? Also possible now. Scary. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, we're all going to have to lean in, right? You promised me. Don't mess it up. Cool. I think that's my time. Thank you.
Just automatically assumed that was Mike. I appreciate Mike. I appreciate Nick setting us up with exponential thinking. So, you know, we could have a range of different people talking about the future of work, but the secret here is that I actually control the time clock. So I wanted to take just a few minutes and give you some of the perspective that I've gained from focusing on this arena for the past half dozen years. So. I mentioned earlier I've got 3 hats that I spin constantly. On the chair for the future work with Singularity University. We've got a small but mighty consulting company called Charette, which is Heidi and me, and a group of amazing freelancers that work with us. And then we've also got a small software company, because there's just not enough time in the day, called eParachute, built from the intellectual property of a book called What Color is Your Parachute? The World's Enduring Career Manual. As I mentioned, Eric is also our business partner in that. And so what this does is it gives me what for me is a tremendous exposure to a range of different perspectives from around the world. With Singularity University, we've been able to interact with a wide range of leading thinkers and thinking leaders who are all trying to do as Nick says, to be able to leverage these changes to the benefit of humanity. With Charette, we dive into specific issues, and so that's why this conference, that's why we're trying to bring together a range of people to be able to focus on solutions. And then with eParachute, we know a lot. I was actually trained as a career counselor when I was 19. When I wasn't that much interested in college, I sort of fell into the family business, and it just so happens that my father was a recovering minister who had been laid off, and went to go write a book for other ministers who'd been laid off, and it turned to this book, What Color is Your Parachute? So, and if there's any experience I could offer for every 19-year-old on the planet, it's to be counseling people in their 40s and 50s who feel like they've been in dead-end jobs. And the only takeaway you can have is that you should do what you love. So, and back in the early 80s, what I found I loved was high tech. So that's how I ended up becoming immersed in so many of the issues that we're dealing with in terms of the impact of technology. So if we could load the slides, that'd be great. And okay, so I'm gonna talk about the 3 futures of work. Now, let's see if we go, there we go, okay. As I mentioned earlier, when you hear Nick talking, you're talking about these exponential technologies, what happens is that same curve, that exponential curve just happens again and again. And so there are those of us who are able to see these innovators and hear the things that they're working on, and understand that these technologies are having this tremendous impact, but then in other areas they're just not widely exposed. And so this is true. Well, Bill Gibson was right. This is what's happened over and over again. And as a matter of fact, we've been thinking about the future throughout our human history. We've been thinking about the impact, especially, of technological change on work and jobs. So it turns out in the 1940s and 1950s, there was a circular that was distributed in American newspapers that was called It's Closer Than We Think. And this was an artist who talked to a range of different brainiacs at the time, what might the future look like? And so you would open your Sunday paper and you would see, this is Arthur Radabaugh, the artist, you would see there we go, a vision of electric cars. People that would get in cars and there wouldn't be gas. It would have electricity driving them, and of course, game over. You would see pictures of robots driving cars with people just sitting and turning and talking to each other. And of course, we're there already. So the future is already here. Rocket mailmen, they would get things distributed to your front door by something that flies. Oh yeah, we got that too. And then the idea would be that you would eventually be able to not just drive into a downtown, but you could fly into a downtown. You could land. And of course, there's 30 innovators, companies all around the world that are creating the next generation of flying cars, which you'll summon with an app just like you do with an Uber driver. Robot farms, yes, we got that too. Robot-driven tractors. And also, there was a lot of thinking about how will all of these futuristic technologies affect the world of work? And of course, we have a one world job market now. We have the Skype interviews. We have people that are doing remote work. And so many of the things that were envisioned then, we're living in that science fiction future now. So the challenge is that the rhetoric over and over again about automation is usually driven by the people that are creating the technology. How did that happen? Because they're usually the ones that understand it, they're the ones that are promoting it, the ones that are marketing it, that have a huge incentive in promoting that picture of that future. And so robot factories, yeah, we got those too. But we worry as humans about impact. We worry about that future because we're all pattern recognizers. We all put together, oh, wait a minute, you're talking about robots here and robots there and software there, and then you try to project in the future, and we can't envision what those changes are. But I guarantee, if I waved a magic wand and we went back to the early 1800s, when in the United States, about 70% of all the economic output depended upon agriculture. And I said to you, in 150 years, we're going to have this thing called the Industrial Revolution, and then the Post-Industrial Revolution, and the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and we're going to invent these things called corporations, and these things called jobs, and these things called schools, and you had to envision how 3 billion people would have work. You would have a failure of imagination. And so this is what happens is, over and over again, we get this impact of technological change. Now, if you listen to people in Silicon Valley who have a vested interest in the technology winning, like Elon, not only is Elon saying that, well, the only real jobs going forward that are going to be available is writing software. And then, in 10 years when code is writing code, those will be gone too. This is a rhetoric that actually makes its way into our headlines. It makes its way into our collective psyche. And we start to think about, well, wait a minute, what is going to happen to humans? Where will work go? And so it creates this huge angst. And that's why I say the future work is really not so much about the future. It's really about today. It's about us looking at the dynamics of today and projecting forward and wondering, how will all this disruptive change impact us? Now, the truth is, robots are getting pretty good in terms of being able to mimic human behavior. I mean, you look at this and you think, well, wait a minute, we think there's all these ways that we're different, and yet, well, no, that looks pretty humanoid-like. And these actually look pretty dog-like. Maybe some of you might have just seen this video. It doesn't show the person in the background with a little baggie picking up the batteries on the lawn, but of course this creates an inevitable backlash. People, we start to really humanize our technology, and then we dehumanize it because we think that it's impacting us. And of course, there's always some point at which the technology is going to turn around and, well, okay, that's. But the truth is, we have been through to this rodeo over and over again. Aristotle worried that some innovator was going to come up with a way to create a robot that would play the lyre, play the harp, and put musicians out of work. Put musicians out of work, right? So Queen Elizabeth would not grant a patent to a new kind of automated loom because she was afraid that it was going to put young virgins out of work. So we've been through this process again and again where we have these waves of automation, new technologies come, and then we have a failure of imagination. What then will humans do? Well, the truth is there always is impact. It did put young virgins out of work, and then they had to go do other kinds of work. But this has been the challenge for humans is, okay, so how do we think about that impact? How do we think about the results of those advances in automation, and then what are we going to do about it? Like, what are the ways that we want to design the kind of society and economy that we want to have? So my economist friends hate when I do this, but here's the way that, unfortunately, the rhetoric goes again and again. So if you think of the way that a work market, that is all the work that's available today, is as a pie, there's a pecan pie, and then the work market's going to change. We're going to have automated looms, or we're going to have robot-driven cars. Then there's a new market. That is, the market works in a different way, and that's the rhubarb pie here. And so if you were doing really well in the pecan pie market, and then you're not prepared for the rhubarb pie, that's the rhetoric, is it's moving so fast and the pace of change, and if you're not trained to be able to function in that new market, the technology essentially leaves you behind. And so what Elon is talking about essentially is that the new market, that entire amount of work that's available, that just gets eaten up, probably by a robot dog. So the whole idea is that there's just less, like the amount of work that's available shrinks. And so why is Silicon Valley like this rhetoric? Technology wins, humans lose. They get all the money, and we have to come up with universal basic income, right? That's the rhetoric. And so it is this zero-sum kind of mentality, and it is, again, itself a failure of imagination. Well, this is, as far as I'm concerned, the disposable human model. And we just, I don't want to get caught up in this. I don't feel like this is not productive for us as humans, right? This is not a way, the message that we're going to send to our kids, if we keep on following down this line of thought, is give up. Give up. Don't be any real work for you in the future. We already made a mess of the planet. Now we're making a mess of work opportunities as well. So, and by the way, Elon doesn't just say that jobs are going to go away. He says the technologies we're going to create will be so advanced from us, it'll be like comparing us to chimpanzees. So that's again, Silicon Valley wins, humans lose. So let me give you some pictures, some images about how all of these changes are impacting work. And then let's talk about the future we actually want to build. So that's one future. That's a disposable human future. I don't particularly like that one. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm saying we shouldn't let it happen. We don't have to let it happen. Instead, let's focus on, if we're going to talk about the future of work, let's step back and let's talk about what work is. Let's talk about what the different futures might be, and let's talk about the one that we actually want to create. Because as Nick says, that's really what we're here for. We're here to collaborate on a positive future of work. All right, so I'm a simple guy. I tend to oversimplify, but I maintain that mechanically, work is just three things. It's a problem to be solved, and it doesn't matter whether the problem is a dirty floor or a complex market entry strategy or the challenges of a particular population in being able to thrive. It's a problem to be solved. How do we as humans, how do we solve problems? We perform tasks. How do we perform tasks? We have human skills. That's it. Our human skills applied to tasks to solve problems. Now, there's lots of other things involved in work, but mechanically, my father, when he wrote Parachute, one of the most simple constructs he realized is, if you position yourself as a problem solver to a potential employer or a potential customer, you dramatically increase your opportunity to be able to get that job and to be able to solve that problem for that customer. So that's really what it is. It's all about problem solving. And so in work, in the constructs that we created as we shifted to these industrial and post-industrial societies, essentially what we did is we sort of created these things called organizations, which were basically the places we put the problems. That's how we sort of channeled human energy. Now, here, like I said, AI is easy, but AV is hard. There we go. Now, after my father wrote this book, What Color is Your Parachute, what he realized, he was focusing a lot on work issues. And then he said, wait a minute, I'm seeing some patterns here. It isn't just work. There actually are sort of three phases of our lives that we historically go through, and what I call the old rules of work. And he wrote another book called The Three Boxes of Life and How to Get Out of Them. And so what he maintained was that at the beginning of our lives, there's this big chunk of education, this big chunk of learning, and where do we do that? We do it in schools. Why did we do it in schools? Because that's where they kept all the information. It was in the books on the shelves and in the heads of the teachers. Where do we keep the world's information today? It's in a different place. But we needed to go to school because we had to make a massive investment in learning the information that we needed to jump into the workbox. But schools were focused on mostly what we call knowledges. That's one sort of grouping of skills, but not on transferable skills, skills usable in a range of different situations. And of course, today we call these hard skills, and we call these soft skills. But we've mostly designed our education systems to cram a whole bunch of information into kids' heads because the whole idea was then you're going to jump into the workbox. So you get really, really good at the education box, and then you're thrown in the workbox. You've got to start at the bottom. And you probably are going to be in that field or in that job for a long time. You're going to be an engineer. You're going to be a lawyer. You're going to stay in that field for a good long period of time. And then at the end, when you're too tired, you really enjoy it, you have this big chunk of leisure in what I call the period formerly known as retirement. And of course, my father's joke was that there's a fourth box and it's made of pine, but we're not going to talk about this one in this particular location. Okay, so what happens though is take these exponential technologies that Nick was talking about. Take all this disruptive change. Take all of these new kinds of work opportunities and work contexts for people, and this old three boxes model suddenly breaks up, becomes unbundled. So kids today, still going to school, come out and get your first job, but you might still be learning online, and then take a gap year with your friends, and then you're still working at a day job, but then you're driving for Uber at night, and you're working on a startup with your friends, or you're taking on multiple shifts because that's what you need to do to make enough money. And so this is a not uncommon approach that many kids, parents ask me nowadays, why won't my kid get a real job? Well, it's actually a rational hedge against an exponential future. Is if you don't actually know which of these things that you're doing are going to lead to the best economic and benefit for you and the best satisfaction, you're going to actually have a portfolio. And so that's what I call it. It's a portfolio of work. So in the same way, back up. All right, so what does your investment counselor suggest that you do? You have safe bets, that's your day job. A little more risk, that's driving for Uber, and then a lot of risk, that's working on a startup with your friends. Well, that's what we do, is we're seeing increasingly this whole thing about a portfolio of work. Well, unfortunately, I'll talk more about the ramifications in a minute, but unfortunately this has a whole bunch of benefits in terms of flexibility and new opportunity, and a whole bunch of challenges in terms of variable income and precarity. So if that's what work and a career is, well then, how do we think about jobs? So my father, when he what color is your parachute, he realized, well, actually, there are 7 different aspects of a job, just like there's 7 different aspects of you. Things that are true about you, that are true about the work that you most want to do. And so you could break down a job into these 7 categories, and you could break down the characteristics of you into the same categories. So it's those transferable skills and knowledges, soft and hard skills that I talked about, but it's also the people environment. What kinds of people help you to do your best work? What's the environment where people help you to be able to collaborate and solve problems? It's also the workplace environment. It's, do you like it to be light? Do you like it to be loud? Do you like it to be quiet? The compensation, not just in regular pay, but in your chances for advancement and your benefits. It's where you are geographically. You like it to be near the mountains, near the ocean, both. And then center of the target, and I'll talk about this quite a bit, purpose. And so he called this the flower. But the basic premise is that there's 7 different characteristics of you, 7 different characteristics of a job. And if you could have perfect knowledge of what you felt you were optimized to do, you could find or create work just like that on an ongoing basis throughout your life. Now, take those same exponential technologies that Nick was talking about, and if you think of a job as a use case for work, we talk in Silicon Valley a lot about use cases, like it's one example of how you do something. Those exponential technologies are unbundling work. And so that old construct of a job, every single aspect of it is being pulled apart. Every single component of it. We used to have to see people that we worked with directly, but now we have Slack and Asana that allow us to communicate around the globe. We used to have to be geographically in the same place, but now we've got platforms like Upwork. We used to have to be in the same building together, but now we have facilities, workplaces like WeWork that are just dynamically populated by people. And so this is what's happening to work. It's becoming unbundled. But we're not preparing our youth for this. We're not preparing our adults for this. This is what's happening in a world of exponential change, is so many of these constructs, the things that we've accepted as being fairly static, the role of a job, the role of an organization, and so on, we are reshaping those definitions as we speak. As a matter of fact, I believe we're going to look back in 10 years, 20 years, and we're going to say this is where we completely created a new context for work. And I call it the digital work economy, but the basic premise is more and more technology is going to infuse more and more of what we do. So, I talked about portfolio of work. What about learning? What happens to learning? Remember, in the old rules of work, we had to go to school early on and get a whole bunch of information into our heads, and then we amortized it over a long life. What do we need to do now? And this was talked about, I think, on a number of the panels this morning, is we need a portfolio of learning. We need to continually be learning. We need to continually remain curious, because over time, more and more of the work that we'll do will be changing on a regular basis. And so we need to develop the skill set for continually learning and remaining curious. And if you want sort of the Bible on this, a friend Esther would just give us a book called Moonshots in Education, where she talks about the transformation of education from what she calls the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. That education must shift to a model of where it is helping to curate learning as opposed to controlling and structuring it, and helping to develop and create lifelong learners. All right, so what are we trying to accomplish here? What we're trying to do essentially is to create the new rules of work to help humans to be able to thrive in that future. But there's a challenge. One of the reasons that this is so difficult for each of us as individuals, not just because of a world of exponential change, but because actually there's some things that we would have wished we could have waved the magic wand and had as part of the process of growing as humans. And so imagine this. You're born. Everybody here was born, right? No cyborgs, no clones, no. Okay, good. It won't be the same in the future. But so you're born, and the nurse comes into your parents and says, "Congratulations. Here's the user manual." Well, when you buy one of these, you get a user manual. What's it good at? What do you use it for? Where's the user manual of you? There's no instruction set. So how do we build the instruction set? Well, it turns out we're all trial and error machines. We don't call it trial and success. We call it trial and error. You touch the stove and it's hot. Are you going to touch it again? Okay, I touched the stove a couple times. But eventually you learn, right? That's what it is. It's all trial and error. And so we have to construct that user manual on our own. We've got to figure out what do we like to do? What are the kinds of skills that we have? What are the kind of problems that we most like to solve? And so the problem is that there is this unique characteristic of us as human beings, is that we actually are blind to so many of our skills. And so just to give you an example, so it's like the tip of the iceberg. We don't really know what is underneath. We continually achieve something, and then we discount that completely because we believe everybody can do that. We all have the same skill set. And it turns out, no, that's not true. Each of us has a completely and uniquely different skill set. Well, we're at an inflection point where the combination of our understanding of technology, development of technology, and our understanding of neuroscience, we will again look back in 10 years, 15 years, and what we'll realize is that we have been spending way too much time developing technology to automate the tasks that humans perform, and zero time in trying to figure out actually how do we develop as human beings? How do we develop our skills? How do we become better problem solvers? And I believe, I wrote a piece called The 6 Superpowers of AI, but the basic premise is technology has the capacity to help us. Rather than us thinking about it as disrupting human work, we can instead think about how do we create technologies that help us. And if there's one example to use, I don't know if any customers of Stitch Fix. Company recently went public. So you go online, you fill out a profile, clothes that you like, you get a box of clothes, you keep some and you send some back. And there's not just a human designer who lives anywhere in the world who's looking at what you kept and what you sent back, but there's also artificial intelligence software. And the software says, well, wait a minute, I think she likes this color of blue, and the designer says, no, it's really this color of purple. They send you new clothes, and eventually you keep it all. So the human alone could only have gotten so far, and the software alone could only have gotten so far, but the software augments the human. What I did not say is that they are partners. Our technology is not our partner. Our technology is our tools. And anything that elevates technology diminishes humans. So it's very, very important to think of this as only enhancing and augmenting us. So this is the second future of work, where technology expands opportunity, helps us to continually adapt to this exponential future. The one caveat that I want to say is that our technology is not perfect. There were many discussions earlier on today about how our own biases, our human biases, make their way into our technology. And it's critical that we understand that over and over again, technologies are going to state the problem in a way that the technology will not always solve as intended. As a matter of fact, in many cases, it solves it in a completely different manner. We don't know. Most AI that's created nowadays, most artificial intelligence software is what's called black box software. We don't know what's going on. We don't know why it makes the decisions that it makes. So in this future, it isn't the technology, actually, so much that is changing work. It's the pace and the spread of change. It's not just that it's moving fast on that exponential curve that Nick was talking about. It's that if you lose your job as a mine worker or a factory worker, and you could go to school, get a 4-year degree in being an AI programmer, you could walk out making $250,000 a year. But that spread, that leap, we haven't prepared people for. We haven't helped people to be able to continually develop new skills. And as I said earlier, I think, in a workshop that we did yesterday, I don't use words like upskilling and reskilling. Those sound like industrial, that sounds like being done to. That sounds painful to me. I don't want to be upskilled. I want to be trained. I want to have tools. I want to be able to continually learn and adapt. I don't want somebody to come up with some program to reshape me into somebody's new vision. So this, in the pace and spread of change future, that's the third future, this is where you start to see real challenges is, wait a minute, it's moving so fast. I was a factory worker, and I could be that AI programmer, but it's such a big leap for me that we could have a whole bunch of work opportunity, but not enough people filling it. As a matter of fact, that's what we have right now. We've got seemingly full employment, but we've got a lot of need, but we don't necessarily know how we're going to get humans from point A to point B to be able to do that work. All right, so I say stop. This is not productive. Trying to predict the future around work is not productive because it makes it sound like it's inevitable. These things are not inevitable. As a matter of fact, this is inevitable. This is what happens. It isn't binary. It's like humans have jobs or they don't because robots and software took them. It's what our friends at Ford have been very clear about talking about is precarity. This is what ends up happening is you've got a tremendous amount of work that's in this country that's depending upon shifts and shifts that people don't have control over. You've got this precarity in a portfolio of work where the income of one month is going to be lower or higher than the next month, and that makes it very, very difficult to predict. And so these are actually the issues that we need to design for. So I'm going to give you 4 what I call fire starters, and then let's talk about the solution. And then we'll take a quick break and bounce around some of these ideas. Okay, so the first one is it's not robots. It's not robots and software. It's not the technology actually taking away a whole bunch of work. The data shows that that's true in manufacturing and a couple other areas, but there's a much bigger impact of trade imbalances. It's the pace and spread of change. It's that we have asymmetry, we have a market mismatch. Second is it isn't loss of jobs, and especially now when we've got such a roaring economy. It's not true in every country around the world, but it really is the loss of stable, well-paid work. It's the loss of good jobs, as you'll hear a lot of talk about tomorrow. Robots and software don't take jobs. Humans give them away. Robots and software just automate tasks. Remember that model? That's all they do. They just automate tasks. Humans decide if those tasks add up that a job goes away. But there's tons of other rational decisions to make if you've automated a whole bunch of tasks in an organization. Then finally, and I want to sort of follow this theme through, we all have superpowers that we don't even know about. How can we create a system by which we can actually understand and leverage those superpowers? So let me just give you a quick example of this. So I talk a lot about mindset and skill set. Ultimately, this is what I think the core of our superpowers are, mindset and skill set. And so what's the difference? All right, so do you mind cueing the video? All right, so I wave a magic wand. Let's see if our video, like I said, AI is easy. Let's see if we can make AV happen. All right, good, okay. Yeah, we don't need sound, but we do need, there we go. Okay, we're rolling. All right, good. Okay. I wave a magic wand, And suddenly, you and I are standing at the base of a mountain. And I have given you all of the skill set of being a mountain climber. You've climbed a mountain 24 times before. You've got all the tools. But you look up at the top of the mountain, and you say, oh, that's too cold. That's too hard. You have all the skill set, but you have none of the mindset. Are you going to climb the mountain? No, you're not going to climb the mountain. So I wave a magic wand again, and now you have all the mindset to climb the mountain, but you have never climbed the mountain before. You have none of the skills. But you look up at the top of the mountain, and oh, I know this is distracting. How many are parents in the room? Okay, you're wondering right now, where are her parents? No, actually, you know where the father is. He's taking the video. Where's the mother? Okay, not in the picture. No. Okay, but it all ends okay. I'm gonna just jump to it all ends okay. Okay, so but I wave a magic wand. Now you've got all the mindset of climbing the mountain and none of the skill set. But you take 1 step, 2 steps. You encounter problems. You solve those problems because, of course, you're a problem solver. And eventually, you're standing at the top of the mountain. You look down. And you say, "How hard was that?" Mindset and skill set. And the ideal is that we are helping to prepare people for a mindset of a world of regular change and giving them the skill set and the tools to be able to continually navigate it. That, come on, darling, you can make it. That is what our deliverable is. And so when we talk about this thing about should we help humans to upgrade faster or should we fix the system, the answer is both. Yes, we have to do both. So on the helping humans side, we have to focus on the skill set for tomorrow. What are we trying to help people to be able to do? And so if I could wave my magic wand and have everybody have exactly, oh, and if you want the book on this, there's a woman by the name of Carol Dweck. She wrote a book called Mindset, and she talks about a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And as you might imagine, if you got a fixed mindset, there's nothing wrong. That's just fine. But those that you're often going to be following the old rules of work, it makes it harder and harder to adapt. And a growth mindset says that, no, you're constantly growing and changing. All right, so I'm going to go through this quickly, and then we'll wrap up. So if I could wave my magic wand, I've written about this extensively. The 4 skills of the future I pick are problem solvers who are adaptive, creative, and with empathy. And it just so happens it's an acronym for PACE. Problem solvers, that's why we pay people. That's why people pay us. Adaptive, because remember that exponential curve that Nick was talking about? It's not going to slow down. Creative, this is what keeps us ahead of robots and software. Creative problem solvers. And finally, with empathy. Why empathy? Well, what does an entrepreneur do? An entrepreneur has empathy for customers' problems. What is somebody who is trying to solve a problem for somebody in a population that is disadvantaged? They have empathy for. So increasingly as humans, this is our differentiator. It's that we have the ability to empathize, to understand the problems of others, to create new products and services to solve those problems, to be able to solve the problems of the world. These are some of the skills that we need to develop to be able to continually navigate an exponential future. But as I said, it's not just helping us to do better. It's also changing a system. Because precarity, this fever chart, is only going to become more and more of a challenge as we have more and more variable kinds of work. So, if we're, again, wave a magic wand, we're going to create the system by which all humans can benefit. Kind of important we start off with, you get paid for it. Like you're going to have income from the work that you're doing. We all do that. The first job that we come out of high school and the first job that we do, mine was taking one pile of paper, making it into 2 piles, and then faxing one of them. Has anybody here seen a fax? My 23-year-old says, can you spell that? So just get the age level of the audience. All right, so the first thing is you get paid for it. Second is, well, wait a minute. After a while, if you've been working, you figure out if you're good at it, they pay you better. Okay. So now we need a system whereby people can get paid work, but then we're going to help them to continue to develop proficiency because that's how they're going to get paid better. And then you need a system, it would be wonderful if you also are using skills that you love. And this was one of my father's insights 40 years ago, is that if you love what you're doing, you love the problems that you're solving, you love the skills that you are using to solve those problems, you will have far more agency. You will be driven to solve problems. And then, if we keep on moving up the stack, helping people to understand that actually what the world needs solving not just any problem, but problems that actually benefit humans and society. Those are the kinds of problems that we should be solving. Well, it just so happens that the Japanese call this ikigai. And Dan Buettner wrote a book called Blue Zones, and he interviewed people in Okinawa. They're the longest living people on this planet, and this is their life philosophy. So the whole idea is that these are the goals, and of course, you know, as we grow, as we're aging, we move up the stack. Now, some people stop right here, and that is just fine. But I maintain in a world of exponential change, we need to help people to continually move up the stack. If you want to read about Ikigai, there's a ton of stuff online. But what happens is young people nowadays, in a world of exponential change, not only are developing a portfolio of work, a rational response is they're saying, wait a minute, I don't like your rules. I don't like the rules where I got to move up that stack, work hard, eventually maybe I'll do something that I care about, and then eventually, you know, when I'm older and I've got tons of money, then I'll give it away. And that's how I'm going to have an impact in the world. No, they actually start the other way. What does the world need? Heads of corporations ask me all the time, why won't those young people come work for my company? It's because you haven't articulated the purpose of your organization. Young people say, okay, now I've got my purpose. Now I will keep working at that because I love doing that. I love helping in that particular arena. And then because I'm doing it over and over again, I'll get better and better at it, and then I'll figure out how I get paid. This is a rational response to an exponentially changing world. All of the dynamics that Nick was talking about, this is an understandable response when the world is changing so quickly. You need a North Star to drive you. And so in that world of rapid change and spread of change, this, I think, is where our opportunity is. We both help humans to be able to continually adapt, and then we have to continually change these systems. So much of the systems thinking that you've heard talked about here is to try to recalibrate these rules so that we can help humans to be able to thrive in a world of exponential change. This is where I think our greatest opportunity is. And helping people to understand that purpose, and if that's too big a word, you can use meaning, that purpose has a spectrum. And it goes from something that you see in your digital distraction device, topic that you're not interested in at all, you just ignore it. And then eventually you realize, no, I actually have some interest in that. No, wait a minute. I've got deep interest in this. This might be my hobby. No, this is my work. Now, again, in the old rules of work, many people stopped here. And that is just fine if you can continually find or create work. But in a world of exponential change, I believe people need to move farther. And you keep on trying to find the thing that is your passion and ultimately meaning for you. Why are you here? Why are you here on this planet? That, I think, is what our opportunity is. And so as we go to the break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about strategies, like especially if we're going to think about the systems that we're trying to change and the policies that can help us to ensure that humans are going to be able to thrive in that exponential future. What I encourage you to think about is, how do we do both? How do we help humans to be able to develop pace, to become those problem solvers who can be adaptive and creative and with empathy? And then how do we change the system? How do we make it so that people can have access to well-compensated work, to be able to get paid better and better for what they do, to help them to understand it's possible to use the skills that you most love and to be driven to do what the world needs? That, I'm going to argue, is the superpower of everybody here in this room. Thank you.
check 1 2.
Two, two, two. Check, check. 1 2. Check. Cool.
Check, check, check.
Okay.
Check, check, check. Can you hear me? Yes.
We are checking the purple microphone. Cool.
Check this. Check. Can you hear me in this one? Check, check. Nick, can you hear me? Check, Nick, can you hear me? Here I am. Check, 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 check. Nick, can you hear me? Okay. Check. Nick, can you hear me? Check, 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 check. Check the mic. Check, 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 check.
One, two, check. 3, 4, 1, 2. Maybe it was easy. Check. 1, 2, 3, 4. Check, check. Check. 1, 2. No. Did you hear that? All right. One, 2, 3, 4. Mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4. Check, check. 1, 2. 1, 2. Check. 1, 2. Check. 3, 4. No cash, only check. 1, 2. 1, 2. 2, 2. 3, 4. Check, 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 check. 1, 2. 1, 2. 3, 4. Check. 1, 2. Go on stage. Check microphone. Check, check, check. Did I? 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 4. Nick and Yakub with microphones. It sounds pretty good from here. Check 3, 4. Check 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. What's that? No, I will not. Check, check. Oh, use my 1, 2. Check 1, 1, 2. I think we're okay.
Folks, take your seats, please. We're going to get started in just a minute. Sorry? Yeah, that's fine. Folks, please take your seats. We're going to start in just a sec. Okay, folks. We're going to take it to the finish line. Take your seats, please. Okay. I hope the level of conversation means that you're meeting new people and building rapid friendships. So, all right. So the final component of the perspective that we wanted to try to help bring to the fore is all of the issues that we've been talking about in terms of not just what's happening, but the impact of exponential change happens against the backdrop of policy. That is, what are the rules by which we agree we're going to guide human endeavors? And so I always talk about this and say, because I'm a simple guy, I tend to distill these things down. Policy, at the end of the day, is really just two things. It's either lubricant or it's glue. That is, it's either we want to accelerate the things we think should happen, or we want to slow down the things we don't want to have happen. So yeah, exactly. So it's either grit or grease, and as Mr. Bowley says. And so what really our opportunity is to think about at the intersection of work and our economy and our organizations, what are the policies that we have designed to be able to help us to continually have the best possible future for humans? Well, it turns out that there's a whole bunch of frictions that we have put in place that are not helping to actually increase the capacity that we have for ensuring that there's broad benefit. So we've put together an amazing group of people that are going to talk from a different range of perspectives, but the focus is on what are the win-win solutions, like what are the ways that we can, or if you're a fan of The Office, the win-win-win-win solutions that are going to broadly benefit individuals, organizations, communities, and countries. And so please help me welcome Policy for the Future. All right, welcome.
All right, thanks everybody. And thank you to the guitarist. We were all talking in the green room about how nice it is to have live music and appreciating somebody who gets that kind of innovative thinking into the group. So it's a little late in the day, and I always like at this point to try to get some audience participation into the conversation. So just very quickly, stand up if you have more than one source of income right now. All right, sit back down. We're going to do a series of 4 questions in total. Stand up or raise your hand if you don't want to stand up. Stand up if you are fairly confident you will still have your main source of income in the next 3 months. Okay, sit back down. Stand up if you were to lose your main source of income. You are confident that you would be able to readily replace it at a level that continued your current standard of living. Okay. And then finally, stand up or stay standing if you feel like you have opportunities to improve your skills and think about the things that you like most about your job. All right, great, thank you. My name is Kristen Sharp. I'm a partner at the venture studio Entangled, which looks at the ways to transition and transform both education and the workforce, and invest in and think about the connections between the people and platforms that are coming up with new ways to connect people with those kinds of skills, and also the consulting and strategic advice that goes with actually implementing new systems. Our charge today and the topic of our panel is how to make sure is public policy and how public policy can support everything about good work and good jobs and the future of work. And basically, we're trying to think about how we can create the public policy that ensures that everybody has the kind of job security and confidence that all of you just expressed. So with me today, we have a great panel from this way forward. We have Madeline Jennis with Jobs to Move America. Then we have Abby Langston from PolicyLink. We have Kellen Blossom with Thumbtack and Vikram Iyer with Postmates. I want to start by just giving everybody a quick opportunity to talk a little bit about your focus and the work that you do and how you answer the question of what the outcome that we should be thinking about public policy achieving is. What do you think we can best use public policy to do in supporting the work of the future?
So Jobs to Move America is a nonprofit organization. We work on the idea of having public contracting and public subsidies support good jobs and sustainable future. And one of the things that I've been noticing all day, and I've been noticing as I've been participating in many of these conversations on the future for workers and the future of our economy, is that the conversation is framed in kind of an odd way, which is that despite the fact that we know there's massive inequality in this country, that there's historic and systemic things like racism and oppression in this country, and a tremendous power imbalance, the entire emphasis is on what the individual worker needs to do in order to improve his or her lot. And that if there's a failure by that worker, then it's her or his problem. And our role and the role of companies and the role of government is really just to give that person a little extra leg up. And so what I want to do is recognize that we have this enormous power imbalance and shift that completely. And really the conversation from my perspective should be about what companies and what government and what we need to do to create a structure where everybody has access to a good job and an opportunity for a decent life. And so what does that mean in the context of the changes in technology and the changes in the nature of the way workers are treated in terms of employees or not, and how people have multiple jobs and all of that? I think there are really three areas that I believe really present an enormous opportunity for us, and especially government and companies, to shape the future for workers and really into an equitable future. And so one of those we're going to talk a little bit more about is really kind of basic regulation. Like, people need to have access to a decent job, and the kind of the rules of the road around minimum wage and health and safety and workers' compensation, that needs to still exist because we're still human beings. And so that's one thing. The two other things where I think they're powerful tools, and really this is where I believe that public policy can and should be focusing. One is that our government, cities, states, federal government, gives away probably over $100 billion a year to private companies to create jobs in economic development. And I actually sit on a state tax credit commission. We had our meeting yesterday. We gave away $90 million. And this issue came up extensively, and I proposed something that we're calling a technology impact assessment, and I can talk more about that later, but that any government giving away economic development should require that and make sure that it's going to create good jobs. And then the final thing is the $2 trillion that city, states, and the federal government give away every year in public contracts. That's 12% of GDP. The biggest customer that many, many companies in this country have is government. And so we should turn that on its head and shape that and use that to create the equitable future that we all believe in.
Great, thank you. I think everybody just sort of, as you're answering the question, think about what do you define as a good job and how can public policy help us get there?
Great, thank you. Is this working? Okay. So one of the things that I'm really interested in thinking about with you all in this conversation is how can we center the human aspects of the future of work, thinking of work not just as meeting corporate needs and producing shareholder value, but also meeting human needs and the needs of community and producing social value. And I think that we have to keep a really strong focus in that question on racial equity. So I'm from PolicyLink. We are a national research and action institute, and our goal is to advance economic and racial equity. And if you've heard anyone from PolicyLink talk, you've probably heard them talk about equity as both a moral and an economic imperative, right? So we know that by 2044, the US will be a majority people of color nation. When we want to talk about accelerated change, 25 years ago, people of color were just about 22% of the population. 25 years from now, people of color will be the majority. But we also know that there are deep and abiding racial inequities in education, in employment and wages, in incarceration, in health outcomes. And so we have to come to terms with the fact that we are systematically leaving behind the very people in whose hands the future of this nation is going to reside, right? So when we think about the future of work and we think about the role of innovation, I think that that racial equity lens can really help us to make sure that we're solving for the right problems. You know, you can buy a faucet for your kitchen sink that will recognize your face when you walk up to it, greet you by name, and turn on the water at exactly the pressure and temperature that you want. Like, that's kind of cool, but is that really the problem we ought to be putting our collective capacity towards solving when there are 785 million people in the world who don't have clean water at home, right? So I think that really keeping that human community needs centered, thinking about what work can do to promote that, to help folks reach their full capacity and their full potential, is the conversation that public policy and a racial equity lens can help us to get to.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Kellen, and I promise that Vikram and I did not purposely coordinate our outfits today. How many of you have heard of Thumbtack? All right, a few. We'll get some more converts. So Thumbtack is an online platform that helps local service providers find new customers. So your caterer, your electrician, your dance teacher, anything where you need a skilled professional, we can help connect you. So when your very smart and very creepy faucet breaks, you can go on Thumbtack, find a plumber who can come out and fix it. And I think that kind of informs how we think about the future of work, because there's going to be a ton of new technology. We're going to have, you know, smart toasters and all those things. But on some level, there are jobs where you're always going to need a human. It's really going to be hard to automate your plumber to go in and fix that. It's hard to automate your wedding caterer, kinds of things, that these type of good local service jobs that are going to be around. And so on the policy side, my job is to think, how can we make it easier for people that are running their own small business, that are self-employed, to do the job that they want to do. You know, we ask small business owners to do everything. We ask them to not only do their craft that they're good at, but we ask them to be an expert in accounting, we ask them to be an expert marketer, tax compliance, their own benefits specialist. And so we're looking at policies that we can help small business owners take care of all of the rest of the things. So the things that we're looking at are, how can we make healthcare more affordable and more accessible to people that might be making a little bit more money than needed to qualify for subsidies or for Medicaid, but still not making enough to really pay for those expensive premiums? How can we make retirement savings accessible and portable to all by supporting state-run programs or retirement saving accounts that can move with you from job to job? The type of policies for those that are truly working by themselves to make it so they can succeed. So that's what we're focused on.
Good morning, or good afternoon. Wow, I've been on a couple different time zones. Thank you for having us. My name is Vikram. I work for Postmates. I don't know if I can also get a show of hands if anyone's used Postmates before. Okay. Particularly, a lot of people are accustomed to using this app for food-based delivery. We are an on-demand delivery service that, in the same way that you can tap a button and get a ride-share ride to show up on demand, what this does is link you to a local merchant that is selling a particular good that you would want, and then it sends a courier to go pick up that good and drop it off at your house, usually within 45 minutes to an hour. If it's taken longer, I apologize. See me after, we'll refund you. part of the way that we see public policy is maybe through three lenses. I'll start with the retail side first. I think when we talk about future of work, we're constantly bombarded by every other week there seems to be a McKinsey report that talks about automation and the offsets of jobs. But we like to also think about it from sector-specific lenses. So for many folks, particularly here at Wayne State University, a lot of people are going to use our app when on a lazy Sunday, maybe they're hungover from a party and they want a burrito delivered to them. But there's a totally different other side of our marketplace that is being bombarded by new evolutions in technology, and that is the actual retailer. So if you think about the Amazon model, I'm sure many of us use it. It's hyper convenient. What it does often is build a warehouse on the outskirts of a city, inventorizes goods in that warehouse, and then funnel goods into the town. What that does, though, aside from its convenience, is that shortchanges your or my desire to actually go to that local pharmacy to get goods, that local hardware store, or even a local food establishment if even now groceries are coming through this warehouse approach. Postmates is actually taking the entirely inverse approach to that model. We index the product offerings of the merchants and restaurants and places that sell goods in your city, and then it connects those brick and mortar retailers with a couple of tools. In our instance, a matching algorithm that helps them find new customers that are on totally other sides of town that otherwise may not have known about that establishment or would have had the time to go over there. And it connects them to a courier network of about 350,000 active couriers on our platform in any given day. That means that now, in that era of Amazon, brick and mortar retail has a slightly more level playing field when it comes to being able to compete in the era of online e-commerce. So one area in which we try and encourage public policy is for a lot of those local businesses, using on-demand delivery is a way to increase their sales. Here in the state of Michigan, we're actually increasing sales by 4.2 times the rate for on-demand merchants that were to use on-demand delivery compared to those that did not use on-demand delivery. But a lot of those merchants are small stores. These are stores that maybe have only one storefront. And so their ability to get credit, for example, is often stymied by any sort of historical decisions that they've made, or maybe the fact that the bank doesn't necessarily think that they're a place in which they can bet long term. So we're partnering with different municipalities and different crediting systems across the country to be able to use the ticketing volume of how many orders on-demand delivery is actually creating to create a new base of understanding of what their credit reliability score could actually be outside of the specific and traditional crediting systems. And we're doing this in partnership with a organization called Kiva, as well as with another tech company called Square, and it's opening up massive credit lines for workers. So one area is thinking about the future of retail. The second area is that because we have such a hyper-mobile workforce, we are also thinking about how people who stitch together different income opportunities, how we can, as a company, responsibly set new floors of standards for earnings, for wages, for benefits, and engage lawmakers about new considerations around those benefits, which I'm sure we'll unpack a bit more. But the second way we're thinking about it is also that we have a hyper-mobile workforce that tends to be well out of school. So for us on the platform, we're talking about people that don't have captive training of that K through 12 environment or higher university environment, but are still interested in getting jobs. 40% of all Postmates are looking for full-time work. Only 20% of them have an accredited college or community college degree. So we're also working with different grant-making organizations and skills-based organizations to plug our workers into those upskilling organizations and those resources. And the third and final way that we think about it is a little bit more on the robotic side, on the autonomous side, of the fact that we have been using a lot more automated technologies, including matching algorithms. So what does it actually mean to have a workforce where you have middle management by an algorithm, or what does it mean to have robotics move goods in cities and make sure that we're plugging workers into those jobs? Germany invests heavily in advanced manufacturing, and they're really good about having those tech companies export the state of the art of that technology to universities and to labor unions to train up workers to keep pace with that state of the art. So we've been experimenting with alternative training approaches, including apprenticeship programs in-house at Postmates, as well as ways in which we can package the state of our advanced AI and automated technology and share that out with school districts in different ways. And I think across all of those sectors, making sure that we're thinking about what this ladder's up to in terms of good jobs is going to be key for a policy conversation.
Okay, thank you. So pretty wide-ranging set of things that we're thinking about in terms of how public policy can support future of work. Everything from fair pay to racial equity to the economic and entrepreneurial scaffolding that supports people who are independent entrepreneurs to the financial things that help support that. But one one of the questions that I repeatedly get from governments, from institutions, from mayor's offices, and even universities is basically who should be what are some specific examples that of policy that has been helpful in transitioning people to new opportunities, and who instituted those things? So what level of government and what do you think the actor should be in order to sort of get people connected to new things? Maybe we can start with you, Madeline, since you had mentioned the technology impact assessment. Just maybe a little bit more information about who has used that and how it has worked in practice.
Thanks. This is all very interesting. I'm really excited to be here with my colleagues from very different backgrounds. So this is a great conversation. I think that really for me, the fundamental question is what's the problem we're solving for? I mean, who are we trying to impact? And I really do believe that we can't be developing policy to solve for the individual's problem. We need to be developing policy to shape companies' decision-making and behavior. So the idea, and I'll give an example. The technology impact assessment is an idea that came out of some conversations with folks. I mentioned that I serve on a state tax credit commission in the state of California that gives away several $100 million a year in tax credits for job creation in the state of California. An increasing number, millions, multi-million dollars, the applications come from large companies that want money to create jobs, but they're creating jobs that are going to eliminate jobs. Their businesses are set up to eliminate jobs. So, for example, yesterday we had a meeting, and Kroger's, huge global corporation, they have, in California, they're Ralph's, Food for Less, others. They're partnering with a British company called Ocado, which is an entirely robotic fulfillment center. So, the Kroger's was coming to us, the state of California, with a request for $3.5 million to open a robotics fulfillment center in California. And I was the only one who said, wait a second, let's get in the weeds here, okay? You say you're going to create 200 jobs, but explain what this is going to be like. And they described this dystopian vision of, there's all these robots, and then there's these shoppers who are standing there, and they're timed, and they're paid minimum wage, and they're supposed to check the bags to make sure that everything is okay. And it goes out the door, and then there's some drivers who then deliver that. And for me, it was, wait a second, how many jobs are going to be eliminated? What kinds of jobs? And you want us to subsidize this. There's something wrong with this equation. We should be requiring any company that wants money for job creation to say what jobs are going to be created, how the quality of those jobs, what training is needed, what jobs are going to be eliminated, because so how many of the retail jobs are going to be eliminated, or how many of the driver jobs, or whatever, or in the warehouses where currently these are sorted by people. And then we should make the decision based on that basis. And maybe instead of that $3.5 million giving it to Kroger's, we should be giving that to some of these mom and pop brick and mortar, the plumber that wants to really grow his business, those kinds of things, rather than buying into a system that is putting people out of work or creating outrageous pressure, dehumanizing pressure. So that's one policy idea. I think there are a number of other things that people are experimenting with around the country that, again, really resets the table for companies and makes it so that companies that want to be high road and responsible and treat people well and create good jobs are not being underbid by those companies that are willing to go as low as they're allowed to go.
Thank you. What about Vikram or Kellen from one of the companies? And what are some examples of ways in which you've worked with public policy advocates or people to institute things that benefit workers?
So there's two policies that I wake up every morning thinking about. And if you don't believe me, I'll show you the 5:30 a.m. emails to my team that are mildly coherent. And the first one is healthcare. So we asked all the small business owners that use Thumbtack after the ACA went into effect, what was the major factor in deciding to maybe leave your 9 to 5 and start the business that you wanted to? And 25% of them said the availability of now being able to get health care on the marketplace was a primary factor in them deciding to start their own job. We know that job lock is real. People stay in jobs that they don't like, that don't fit their lifestyles, that aren't paying them what they need in salary because they're so afraid of losing their health care and their benefits. And so, even though if you go on the marketplace today, it's estimated that about 2/3 of the people using the marketplace will be able to get a policy for $10 a month, which is great when you factor in federal subsidies. There's that other third that still aren't able to afford it. If it's $500 a month, that's unaffordable for a lot of people making a middle-class wage. So what are we doing to strengthen the ACA, to come up with something even better than the ACA, to make healthcare more accessible, which will allow workers to have real leverage in choosing the jobs that they want? And the second policy, and this is a personal passion of mine, is non-compete clauses. So these started as with high-level executives so that they wouldn't take intellectual property from one company that they learned and sell it to a competitor. But they have become prolific. For workers making under $40,000 a year, about 15% of those workers have non-compete clauses that say if you're working for one company, you are not allowed to go work for a competitor or to start your own company within, sometimes a 50, 100-mile radius. And this keeps workers in jobs that they don't want because it limits their economic opportunity. And we don't need them. There's states like California that have banned them completely. There's other states like Massachusetts that are slowly rolling them back. That's an easy way to give workers voice, to give them choice, and to make sure that they have real economic opportunities and able to choose the jobs that they want.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, there are probably two as well. Mine are less 5:30 a.m. and more like later in the night. More 1 a.m. Yeah. So one of them is on this notion of how our safety net is constructed right now. I think that a lot of us, and it sounds like many of you that stood up, are probably, if you have more than one source of income, there's a high likelihood that maybe you're deriving that income through a 1099 status, or you're a consultant or a contractor on the side. And it strikes me that when we do talk about, and you spoke to this, that there's skyrocketing healthcare costs, there's wage stagnation in this country. There are a lot of challenges, and the sense of employment ends up defining your station in life in a really major way. And I'm not so sure that that is the way it ought to be. I do think companies like mine have to be better and establish better standards. I think that we should all hold ourselves accountable that if we are paying out independent workers a certain wage, that is a fair wage and that is above minimum wage. That if we are thinking about the fact that we have a mobile workforce and that we know many of them are looking for full-time work, that we take it upon ourselves to actually think about career development as a benefit, even if that is not to the benefit of our company in the end. So we start to think about different types of benefits that are more mobile with the workforce, more portable with the workforce, rather than just static when it comes to you work for this company and therefore you get the derivative of this benefit. And that for us manifests itself in two ways. The first is if we know that there are a lot of workers who want better jobs, I do think that there is a supply side issue of what those jobs are and then defining what it means to be a good job. But on the demand side, we need to make sure that workers are able to compete in this modern economy. And I know we hear that all the time. I'm sure that's been talked about throughout this conference. But for us specifically, we know, and we can actually, through survey data of our workforce of couriers, we can actually identify core issue areas where a majority of our workforce would like to plus up their skills. But we also know that financially, they don't have the money to do so. So we have been working with various organizations around the country to actually apply for Federal Department of Labor grants and then graduate in classes of Postmates, that's what we call our couriers, into these programs. And we've selected about 7 programs in 2019. We'll probably iterate on that in 2020, but they are consistent around marketing programs, Salesforce and CRM programs, data science programs, English as a second language program. And what happens is that they go through this, and one of two things comes of it. Either they leave that with a certification or a vocational training certificate that allows them to kind of up-level themselves as an adult worker. It also allows us as a company to really understand, does a blended learning environment when it comes to in-person learning versus online learning actually impact somebody who's ostensibly in a car on behalf of Postmates making deliveries. So that data is very useful. But it also allows people to land full-time jobs and spin them off the platform. The problem is that these workers wouldn't have access to any of those job search accelerator programs if somebody didn't pay for them or subsidize them. So one of the benefits that I've been thinking about, and I don't know if this is a perfect solution, and I've taken this cue from a few think tanks that have written about this too, is that in the same way that we have pre-tax savings HSAs, why don't we think about having pre-tax savings vehicles and accounts for long-term continuous education and adult education? Now maybe there could be a matching from companies like mine to build up that capital. Maybe that matching can come from the government, but I think a vehicle like that would make us a lot less afraid that to go back to school at a later in life has to come saddled with debt. And I think as we look at a mobile worker audience, that's really important for us.
Great, thanks, Abby.
Can I respond to that? So I just want to push back a little against the idea that there's a finite supply of good jobs and that it's the market and what it decides to do that determines what those jobs are and how many of them there are going to be, right? I think that there's another way to think about this in which we can decide what jobs and what work we consider socially necessary and socially valuable, and then take the steps to make sure that all of those jobs are good jobs that provide good wages, that provide family supporting benefits, that have fair scheduling, protect the right to organize. So yes, we're going to need more computer systems engineers and data scientists, and we should make sure that those careers are accessible to people regardless of their race, gender, zip code. But we also need childcare workers and home health aides and history teachers and journalists, and those should all be good jobs too. We're going to need people to rebuild critical infrastructure. We need people building bridges and water systems, and those should be good jobs too. And so this idea that we have to figure out, once the market decides where good jobs are going to be, how we can help people access them, I think is a failure of imagination in one regard, and that we can think a little bit bigger about how to do that. When it comes to job quality, though, we don't necessarily need a new, big, sexy idea. I think the answers are things that we haven't ever gotten right at a large scale, but they remain the same. Cities have been the sort of policy crucibles, I think, for trying out some of these things. We heard earlier about the domestic workers Bill of Rights in Seattle. San Francisco has a retail workers, a suite of protections for retail workers around fair scheduling and hiring practices. But I think that it's going to take, given the scale of the challenges, a little bit bigger imagination, a little more radical thinking at a larger level around portable benefits, universal portable benefits, around a job guarantee, around some of the kind of big scale policies that can impact at the same scale as the challenge.
Great.
Yeah, I just want to point out one thing. The free market or private market actors who are, the technologists, the leading and, innovators, are building on the platform of our taxpayer investment into the creation of the internet, communications technology. There's an amazing book. I mean, there's a lot has been written about this, but Mariana Mazzucato, who's an economist in English or she's in England, has written The Entrepreneurial State, which really gives the history of how so much of the real R&D that went into creating the technology that now big companies are profiting from enormously. And so the fact that these enormous companies are able to just set the terms and conditions of what we need to be thinking about, and it seems absurd to me that we need to take and demand a return on our investment in the form of really good jobs and a commitment to basic human decency.
So, thank you. So that's a great point, and one that several of you have mentioned in different ways, getting the voice of workers and the input of workers into the conversation. So what do you think are the ways that we do that in a way that sort of highlights the things that are most important to people who are working in different kinds of jobs, and sets out to address the concerns that make things difficult for people or make things less than good jobs for people? Anybody can.
Well, I'll start, even though I just spoke, but I think there's a scale. I mean, I think that the research from places like Germany shows that the more worker input there is without fear of retaliation, the more productivity goes up, the better a company does in the long run. And so creating the opportunity for worker input is kind of the bottom, the baseline. And I've worked in factories and workplaces all over the place, and the level of fear that exists in the workplace and frontline workplaces is so enormous that most workers who respond to real surveys say there is no way in hell I'm gonna say what I really think about this production mess here. So that's one. But I think that unions are really on the upsurge, and that is a super exciting thing. That workers, young workers, in journalism, in tech, in all over the place, teachers, workers are looking again at this idea, which will never grow old, about collective action. Workers coming together and bargaining collectively for things that not only improve their lives and their families' lives, but improve the work overall. Journalism, for example, we are getting better journalism now because journalists are organizing into unions. And I would say there are other forms of collective action where workers come together in different ways and are trying to either negotiate community benefits agreements, or they're trying to negotiate just simple workplace agreements with their employers. And those are all things that we should be lifting up and supporting.
Anybody, Vikram? I do want to leave maybe 5 minutes or so for questions from the audience too.
Okay. Just quickly on that, I think that is a really important point. I mean, I'm blanking on the name of the company. I think it's called Riot Games, but there's a video game company based in Los Angeles that is seeing this. It's one of the first instances, or at least that I've seen, of tech workers. These are designers of video games, coders, engineers, that are actually organizing and using that model. And I do think it's an important lesson, in my opinion, and my politics might come clear when I say this, but in this country, the 5-day work week, minimum wages, OSHA safety requirements on the job, the fact that lactation rooms are required within office spaces for certain sizes, all of that was actually fought for and realized by unions in this country. And I think that's the source of a widening middle class in this country. One of the interesting things about working at a tech company now is that I've only spent my life prior to this in government. And so what I'm realizing is that when you go inside a private business, you have to start there's always a coalition of the willing that wants to nudge the executive leadership in a particular direction, and that is a slow process, but it's an important process. I do think that when we think about the voice of the worker, we should also think about how that worker actually operates, how frequently they're engaged in that form of work. Do they see it as a principal form of work, just so that way we can make sure that the collective action approach is actually best tailored to their needs and their outcomes, as opposed to us as companies or unions or lawmakers making assumptions about what they work. And I think that's illustrated where a lot of us sometimes, I feel, will go to conferences and have conversations around the future of work, and rarely are we seeing workers represented in those dialogues. And I think part of that is an important consideration for that going forward.
Yeah, no, it is a great point. Looks like we have a wide-ranging conversation starter here as our question, which is it really the issue that we need new policy solutions, or should we just be enforcing the laws that are already on the books through more sort of will to get it done and identification of the problems we're trying to solve? What's the general consensus on how likely it is we can get things done at individual levels of government, and what's most likely to get done?
Both.
I agree. I mean, and there's a lot that government can do when there's the will.
And I think, I think it's clearly a combination. Most of the workplace policies and the labor policies that we have in place are decades old, when fundamentally the way people worked was different. People expected to be at the same company for decades. They had a different expectation of flexibility. It certainly wasn't as friendly to working parents or working women. And so clearly we need an update to a lot of those to kind of reflect where work is going. But also, I think we see a lot of exciting things on the political pressure. The fact that we're now having Future of Work conferences every single day of the year means that there is interest in it. The political leaders are talking about different policies and that they now have a worker or a future of work policy, whereas 10 years ago, it was not on the top of political agendas. I think that's progress, but I think we need to push harder for both new ideas and implementing ideas that might have been around for a while but lacked the political will to move forward.
So the second question that we see is, what are the ways that we can help workers hold employers and governments accountable? And have you seen anything particularly effectively that is coming from the workers?
Well, yeah, I think the place to start is thinking about the legal and regulatory framework that either empowers or chills worker organizing and worker empowerment. When we talk about empowered employment that provides dignity and worker voice and can allow workers to build the kind of political muscle to move elected officials, to move political will, that's not yet a settled question, right? And so I think that we have to make sure that there are protections and mechanisms for actually enforcing them that allow, as Madeline was pointing out, for workers to do that internal work of organization, of speaking up, of determining and then being able to exert what their will is, without fear of retaliation. So I think that there are at various levels of government, as well as in private policies and corporate policy, there's a lot of work to do just on that front as sort of the context setting for this to happen.
I want to give a good example because I know we're running out of time, but the Hotel Workers Union has been doing some incredibly innovative work. And the hotel workers represent about 40,000 employees in Las Vegas. And they really, they have turned the tide of politics in Nevada. And in their latest collective bargaining, where they actually went out on strike, one of the things they were fighting for was to bargain over the use of robots in the hotels. And so, because there's a new model of robot that can clean rooms and obviously do a lot of other things in terms of food preparation. And so the workers, and this is majority workers of color and women, they went on strike and they won 6 months advance notice, the ability to bargain over retraining, a voice at the table, a participation in the transformation and the use of technology by their employers. And they did this by just amazing organizing and a really strong visionary union. So I think there are really great examples now of workers standing up. And of course, there's tremendous fear, but I think that provides us a lot of hope.
Great. Well, that's a great note to end on. I want to say thank you so much to all of the discussants for the conversation, and for everybody for remaining with us throughout the day and for really thinking carefully about the future of work and what we can all do to make sure that there's equal opportunity for work going forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, I'll take that one actually. So great. All right, as we're heading towards the finish line, we've got one more session, and then afterwards we've got a reception, which will be right out here. However, there is an evening activity we would love to make sure all of you are invited to. As a matter of fact, invite your friends, invite your family. There's a screening of a PBS 1 hour show called Road Trip Nation. I got a call about a year and a half ago from a PBS crew that was, Road Trip Nation is a show that's been around for actually quite some time, and they wanted to focus on the future of work. And they said, well, so we're just at sort of the front end of this, but there are 3 amazing people that we have found who are each going through their own sort of career exploration, and they're just beginning the trip in Los Angeles, and would you come down and just get a chance to meet them? And so, of course, I'm always up for things like that. And so I had the most amazing time sitting down with these three innovative people who were just the beginning of this journey, and then they went through and visited a number of different areas. But one of them was Bernita Bradley, and so who is just a ray of light, and it turns out is from Detroit. So I wanted to ask her to give you a little bit of an overview, just a few minutes about the experience that she had. And then we're going to have one more session after this and a reception, but we would love for you to come down to the screening, and then Bernita is going to answer some questions in a little Q&A afterwards. So Bernita, I'd love to have you talk about your experience. First, I want to hug.
Hello. So now that we know that I robot can really happen and everybody could die, right? But we got we got cure to it. You know, we got a cure to it. Everybody in this room is the cure. So I just wanted to lighten the mood a little bit with that, and also go into a story. About a year and a half ago, I was working as a community outreach and engagement specialist in the city for several organizations, and doing this work, and I'm helping parents champion laws and change policies around education. And as I'm going to the community, I'm working for these organizations, and they're like, I want you to recruit parents just for this, right? Just for this reason. But I'm talking to community members, and I'm hearing a different thing in the community. It's one thing for a parent to come to you and say that my third grader can't read, but yet I don't have stable employment, or I don't have housing, or I don't have all of these things that I need to make sure that my family's right, to make sure that my family is sustained and whole, right? But I'm perceived in my own city as lazy, or I'm perceived as I just don't want it, or I'm perceived as if I'm just never going to find my way. So that's the lost cause crew, right? And so there was this young boy named Rodney and Rodney, twins in the community, in the 48205 area code, which is the hardest hit area code of the city of Detroit, equivalent to a baby war zone here in Detroit, right? And I'm out in the park talking to people. I'm boots on the ground, y'all. I'm at grocery stores. I'm in alleys. I'm wherever I am. Matter of fact, my nickname is Alley Girl. A lot of people here know me as Alley Girl, right? So I'm not afraid of people, and I'm inviting this young guy into one of the facilities that I work for. Like every now and then, he's moving chairs, he's doing everything. He's always cheerful. Matter of fact, somebody's car was broken in. He came in, and he was like, "Miss B, what happened to that car out there? Who did, somebody in this community? Oh, 'cause we got y'all." If you know, I'm like, no, it's good. You know, we good. Like they're our personal protectors. But this specific day, he came in, and he had this grim look on his face. He was really quiet. He asked me could he plug his phone into the wall to get a charge like he normally does. And I could see something was wrong with him. And, you know, he came, he was like, "Miss B, man, like, I'm trying to find a job, man." He's like, "I'm not a bad guy." He said, "I went to school, I got a degree, I got a high school diploma. I couldn't afford college, this and that, blah, blah, blah." Told me a story. He said, "About the most thing I do is smoke weed, and I probably wouldn't do that if I had a job." And I'm sitting here, I went into grandmama, auntie mode, like, "Look, dude, you just need to do this, you need to do this, and so-and-so's hiring." He's like, "Miss B, I can't even get out there on the bus in time to get the job. The money it's gonna take me to get out there. Then this job right here only wanna pay me this amount. I got a kid, so once I get this, they gonna cut me off of assistance, and then I'm not gonna even be able to afford childcare." So he started just spilling all these barriers, and it just really humbled me, right? Because I've always been this person who's had opportunities. I stand here before you without a degree, and I've worked for some of the most Ivy League corporations in the city, and I've made good money, but people saw something in me and took a chance on a parent who didn't have a degree. And so we need more people to do the same thing with our young people. We need more people to do the same thing when it comes down to the future of work, to think out of the box when it comes down to employability skills, to come out of our ivory towers and to come out of our boardrooms and actually mix with the community and say, "What's up, dude? Why aren't you employable? What's the problem?" So that's what I hope you get from the documentary tonight. By It's funded by the Lumina Foundation. Being from Road Trip Nation is here now, and I'm just honored to have been one of the people selected from across the country to go on the road trip. But that was my mission for the reason why I went on the road trip, because I know I transitioned from one career to the next, roughly around 40 years old. I'm about to be 50. And so if it's challenging for me, somebody who's had businesses and all of this kind of stuff and had support, what's the challenge? And what supports do we need for these young people who don't have the same thing that I had? So thank you guys. I hope you come back. It'll be right across the way. They'll give you the directions to the building. It's just a walk across, so you don't have to weather Mother Nature and Jack Frost out there, who's a little crazy right now. And so thank you guys, and I hope to see you at the viewing.
That was great. All right, so we're just about to pull the train in the station. One more session, and then we'll grab some drinks and hors d'oeuvres. Although I think people say nibbles nowadays because nobody can spell hors d'oeuvres, and then we'll head over to the screening. So. In every event that Heidi and I, when we try to bring together a range of amazing people, we want to make sure is that we're sort of reflecting the sort of yin and yang. We've got all these deep and weighty issues that we talk about, but at the end of the day, we're all people. We're all humans. We all have emotions. We all have lives. We have families. And so it's easy to keep on going back and forth, thinking about, we've got to solve all these 30 problems, and we have to be very analytical. But we also have multiple sides to ourselves, and it's important to continually come back to, well, what is driving this when we talk about the future? What are the anchors when we talk about inclusion? What are the guidelines for how we think about how we're inclusive? And especially, how can we be radically inclusive? How do we actually dramatically try to increase the ways that we include a range of different perspectives and people? And so it's one of my greatest pleasures to introduce two of the most unique people on the planet, an amazing couple, a company called Love and Magic, to talk about radical inclusion. Please join us. Thank you.
Great privilege to be here today. It's a great privilege. Of the 7.5 billion people on this planet, we're here and we're talking about the future of work. I'd like for us to give a round of applause to Gary and Heidi. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Chinedu and I are particularly excited to talk about a new story of human symphony. I was at an 11 a.m. session today, and Sarah with Good Jobs Institute told us a story, reminded us a story of when John F. Kennedy took a tour at the NASA Space Center, and he saw a man with a broom or a mop, and he said, "So what do you do here?" And he said, "I'm here to send a man to the moon." We talk about this time that we're in of exponential growth. It's a revolution. So how do we get information? And I don't mean just information, I mean, how do we get information? And to start, I would love your permission to tell you a story. And after that, my wonderful and beloved partner here will take us on a journey of the how to get information. May I tell you a story? Once upon a time, a woman finds herself at the top of a mountain. She doesn't know anything. She doesn't even know what a mountain is. But if she looks to her left, she may perceive a stream. And when she perceives the stream, her task to take these ginormous logs down may become easier. And so today would like to tell you the story of a new stream that each one of us has in our unique capabilities, in our unique organizations to get information. The concept of human symphony, like these starlings, each one of us moving together with purpose. Is it possible? I can't hear you. Is it possible? What else is there to do for the next 7 generations if not to get information? But why would we do that? What is the point of getting information? The first reason is, like we've heard today, we are in this era of unprecedented, accelerated change. The most innovative organizations understand that the diversity, the uniqueness of each one of their people is actually their crown jewels in this age of innovation. Secondly, we're all, each one of us, participants in the creation of new systems for humanity. And when I say humanity, I mean our children's children. And finally, and why we're here today, is what is our call to participate? There's an Igbo saying from Nigeria, one man cannot cause a stampede. It takes all of us to get information. How do we do that? Would like to talk to you about the how today. Are you ready? Let's do it.
Hello, everyone. So I have the luck of following Oshoke. And I'm going to tell you a story, but it's going to be a different type of story. It's going to be a story about the Homo erectus. It's going to be a story about the history of human coordination. This has been such a wonderful event, so many wonderful ideas, so many visions of possibilities. Gary, I loved your presentation. And what I'd like to do is to maybe talk about some of the history of human organizations. We can understand where we've been, and we can set the stage for where we're going. So around 100,000 years ago, the newly minted species of man, the Homo sapiens, crossed the chasm of Africa into what is now known as India. And they met the most dominant human species in existence, the Homo erectus. Here's a picture of one. Now, these Homo erectus were short, hairy, and fierce hunters and had literally dominated the entire earth for 2.5 million years. They ruled. But these Homo sapiens who were new to the game had these very wonderful superpowers. They had 2 amazing superpowers. The first one is that they had this gift of imagination. They could see things that weren't tangible. But they also had another gift. They had a gift of coordination. They could work with each other and coordinate their efforts to accomplish a goal. And through the application of those 2 superpowers, they prevailed over the Homo erectus. And you and I, brothers and sisters, are descendants of these Homo sapiens. And we too have these wonderful superpowers of imagination, and we have this ability to work with each other. Now, we went from organizing ourselves for hunting trips to villages, to towns, to cities. But the most fantastic, the most spectacular of all our creations have been the startups and the organizations that we represent and work for today. So it's been a wonderful thing. And we've used these wonderful powers of human organization to bring health, wealth, food, clothing, fun for billions of people around the world. It's been fantastic. But I think the reason why we're here today and the reason why this question is so important for society is that in this game of human coordinations, we've lost something. You know, sometimes there isn't cooperation in the corporation, right? And sometimes we work and somehow we feel empty by the work we do. Work doesn't have meaning like the way it used to, at least the way we think it should. So what we love to do today is to really try to pull together what does this vision of radical inclusion look like. We had Nick's talk was wonderful about what these exponential organizations will do for us as society. But the very important question is, how do we put it to practice, right? How do we go from the visions and possibilities we all see to something that's tangible? How do we go in tomorrow to work and say, look, here's our plan? Or as an entrepreneur, here is how I'm going to contribute my unique superpowers to this broader human story. So we've been thinking about this for a while. And what we've come up with is the beloved organizational model. And what this is really a synthesis of lots of research and deep thinking about what does this new age of human organization look like? How can we go from an intention to bring creation into this world and then do it or have it manifest? So here it is. And for those of you, you can go on LinkedIn on my profile and download the entire playbook. So what I'm sharing is in just one page, actually 2 pages of the entire playbook. But now I'll walk through it in not detail, but enough so it's actually meaningful for you. So one of the first design questions of us as leaders, as people who are creating concepts that we want to put into the world, is what's the grounding principle? What's the grounding design principles of the organizations and the work we want to do in this world? So after giving this quite a bit of thought, and it's really been an interesting journey, we've actually come up with something we think is pretty good, and that is the beloved customer. What if at the center of our organizations it was grounded in the intention to improve a lived human experience? What if that was the purpose and the meaning and the reason and the underlying why for our organizations? What would that look like? How would it feel to go to work? And then so you've identified a group of people, human beings that you want to improve their lives. And how do you then organize all the other investors, employees, assistants, advisors to achieve that goal? And the way we've tried to model it is this idea of using very small teams, 5 to 6 people, and we call them super friends, who work together in spirits of harmony, who trust each other, who like each other, and then working intentionally to improve that human life. Obviously, you'll need co-builders, experts. You'll need shareholders, or in the future, token holders as well. But all of this is wrapped into what we call an adventure story of shared value. So all of us coming together to improve a lived human experience. Here's a a cast of characters, so to speak, of this beloved organization. How do we come together to achieve those goals? And again, as I mentioned, the 3 design principles is first one, embodying service to human growth. One of the, Gary and I always have these conversations around how do we curtail the kind of network externalities of capitalism. And I think one of the key areas is this idea of making sure that the organizations we create have purpose, and that purpose is firmly grounded in improving lived human experiences. And the second is using decentralized and self-organizing teams. Much of the dysfunction in large corporations and large-scale organization is really that of just the humanness of our actions, our ability to relate to each other. And I haven't found, obviously there's the Dunbar number of 150 or so, but human beings aren't built for these kinds of mass scale interactions. And we really need to rethink the nature of what the work experience is and make it more human, make it more friendly, make it more comfortable. And the third key principle is to maximize the use of information. Every problem in this world, every piece of complexity is made up of information. Just think about that. Every problem in the world is literally made up of information. Your ability to perceive the elements of that problem is directly related to the ability to solve it. So information washes away problems. Information makes the most ridiculous challenge possible. And we are endowed with our imagination, and there's so much that we can do if we just let our imagination flow and focus on the problem. As I said, you can download the details of all this on our website, but what we've tried to do is to put some structure to this idea of the future of work. This, we believe, is the optimal configuration for human beings to work together in symphony and in an inclusive way to achieve the outcome we all want, which is better human life.
And so, as Chinedu said, you can go on our website and download all of this information. But as you leave here today in the conversation of human symphony, we would like to leave you with 3 tips. We would like to leave you with 3 keys. And we say keys because keys unlock infinite possibilities. And the first key, as we mentioned, is to serve your beloved customer. What if, instead of asking what job you did, what role, what position, the question was, what problem do you solve for your beloved customer? What unmet need, collectively and in our uniqueness, do you solve for your beloved employees? That's the first key. The second key is to create teams of super friends. And when we say super friends, they can also be organizations. Like I said, we can't cause a stampede with one person. So who are the super friends who are also serving the same beloved customers, and are you friendly with them? Are you aligned with them? How do we start to build tribe around problem solving? And the third key...
Actually, before you talk about it a second, I want to just spend a little time with it. So Gary talked about superheroes. And we all are superheroes, right? And to the extent that you know this shows up in your life, I'm sure, right? So the extent that you know what your super unique gift is, the more you can bring it to bear. So I just want to iterate a point Gary made about us self-knowledge, understanding what it is about yourself that's unique, and having the confidence to share it with a group of people you admire, a group of people you work well with, is actually absolutely key to be able to bring the kinds of progress we all want in society.
Right now, you're surrounded by super friends. A lot of us have said the same things in different ways. Now imagine if a group of us could pay attention to a beloved customer. Imagine if a group of us could commit to solving a problem we're all invested in. How much more progress could we make? So while we're here, again, our second key is to be friendly with your super friends. And the third key is tied to maximizing the flow of information, is to make no assumptions. When we make assumptions, we're blocking information passage. We talk about AI and we talk about blockchain and we talk about empathy and human-centered design and design thinking. How can all of these serve our collective intention? Instead of running away from what we don't know, how do we start to run as organizations into what's coming up, what Nick spoke about today, in service to us? I spoke today I gave a comment today at one of the sessions about them is you. There is no separation. So how do we show up for all of us to hook up the next 7 generations to come? It requires us making no assumptions and maximizing the flow of information.
And a more general point to that is this idea of us, we've talked about it, but the idea of systems thinking. That what we consider problems and the assumptions and the rigidity of those problems is because we've made an assumption. The reason why we think walls exist is because we believe they're there. And if you can reframe your mind and think differently about the assumptions that underlie your worldview, you'll find that there's actually many ways to get past those obstacles. And that it's our ability to pass and be imaginative around what we consider problems, right, is actually the key to be able to unlock and unravel those problems.
And so in the spirit of our collective, our greatest collective intention, having this impact, not just spinning, but growing, how do each of us start to embody these principles? How do we get information? I would like to leave you with a question and a poem. And the question is, with your unique superpowers and your unique complexities, and like that janitor at NASA Space Center, doing exactly what you do, whose lived experience are you choosing to improve? Khalil Gibran said the most beautiful thing about work 100 years ago. He said, when we work, we're a flute through whose heart the whispering of hours turns to music. Which of us would be a reed, dumb and silent, when all else sings together in unison? Always we have been told that work is a curse and labor misfortune. But he said, when we work, we fulfill a part of Earth's furthest dream assigned to us when that dream was born. And what is it to work with love? It is to build a house as if your beloved were to dwell in that house. It is to sew a cloth as if your beloved were to wear that cloth. We are each other's beloved. We are the beloved of the future. No, the future is our beloved. No. Everyone coming is our beloved. The next generations are our beloved. So we have the privilege to get information and to do so uniquely as we are with these 3 principles. And finally, as Margaret Mead said, never doubt the infinite nature of your superpowers. That's not what she said, but she said, never doubt that a small group of people can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Elon Musk is making a difference single-handedly What can we do when we come together? It's a privilege to do so. Thank you for your time.